Good morning. So
Good.
I am so excited to be here with my friend Carrie Graham. We are going to talk about all things curiosity and people and learning and stuff, like all the best things about learning.
Yes.
So we agreed on some questions. We're going to use them sort of, I'm sure, and then we're going to have like a normal human conversation, which is the best part of talking to you. So, let's go with the first one, which was talk to me about your relationship to learning and how it actually relates to what you do currently. Like, what are the confluence points there?
Yeah, I was thinking about that question, and the thing that I had to go back to was when my earliest memories as a child. I was just so curious about every and anything. And it led me on a career path where, as a healthcare provider in college athletics, I had to figure out what was wrong with the athletes quickly, right? And so it was a sense of being curious and asking the right questions. And then when I transitioned to being a professor, it was the same thing, right? Like, I'm presenting information, but I had to be curious enough about my students to figure out what they knew, what they didn't know, and then ask the right questions to help prompt them. And that's what I'm doing now in my business. Is even though I'm an adult learning consultant and I'm helping people create learning experiences for their clients, I have to be curious about the business and about the business owner and what is the experience they want to have, but then help them be curious about their clients and their content as well. And so I've come to realize that I actually have a very long history of being curious. Very long. What about you, Sarah?
You know, it's funny. What I think is the most interesting thing about these kinds of things is like I totally answered this question differently. Like I had a whole different kind of thought about it, but it did lead from a very similar place.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like learning is a friend, right? Learning is the oldest friend. Like it is the oldest friend I have. And I think it is the whole between I really like to learn stuff. Like I'm the one that'll be like, wait, how did you do that? Can you show me how to do that? Like stranger, come here. Like, how did you make that thing? Which I think as a little kid, people were like stressed by me.
Right.
I think that is what brought me into teaching. Like, I like that tinkering sort of like, okay, but why did you do it that way? And did you think about it like this? And what if we poked at it and we sort of combined those methods together and then we tried it like this? Like, it is the tinkering part of that I love, or even picking apart, like when I was in a classroom or in other people's classrooms as a coach, you could go like see the same lesson 5 different ways in 5 different groups of kids with 3 different teachers. And by the third time, it was like, oh, wait, hold on. Let's put this thing here. Let's do this over here. Let's play. My first group of kids of the day always knew they were my guinea pig class. Like we were doing science on them basically because things might or might not work.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think now, you know, my job is to be professionally curious as a coach in people's businesses. Like that is literally my entire job. My job is to look at it and go like, like, why did we do that? Like, what do you want to do differently? Do you like it? And to ask the curious questions that like don't internally occur to us when we're in stream, right?
Yeah.
I get to be the outside looking in and going, okay, but you wanted this, you did that. They don't match. Do you see it? And sort of helping people pick that out. And the thing I think all the time is that like that kind of coaching, that kind of conversation is really just the highest form of teaching and curiosity and learning. And like, because the best classrooms work like that. The best teaching relationships work like that. Like everybody had one that was great like that. And one you were like, nope, they weren't curious at all. They did not want to know. But it is that thing I turn back to at every roadblock where it's like, why didn't that work? Like, why didn't that go the way I thought it would? Like, I thought it would do this. Like, let me go tinker with it a little bit.
Yeah,
Work.
Yeah, I like that. I hadn't thought about curiosity from a tinkering perspective, but it totally makes sense. It really does. And that's one of the things that I like about that word curiosity and learning, right? Like there's just so many ways to make it happen and have it be a productive experience, which is what I love so much. You know, like I love all things about bridges, right? Now, I have no degree in engineering, none of it, but like I will sit and watch something on the History Channel of how they built a bridge, you know, and I'm totally engrossed. And then I'm like, okay, it's gone for the, you know, like it's left me.
You know what's really funny about that? I feel like that about tunnels. I find the tunnels that, particularly the ones that go underwater, I can remember driving through the Baltimore Tunnel for the first time as a little kid. We were going to DC, and I was like, wait, can we just stop here? Like this is crazy. Like the idea that you're under water.
Right.
And that somebody was like, you know what? Let me dig a hole through the bottom and then drive a car through it. Like, let me do this. Like, so fascinating to me. Okay, so we're like both weirdly fascinated by transportation, apparently.
Right. Right. But I mean, it is. And one of the things that I have observed in becoming an entrepreneur is so often people are not curious and the learning is very regimented, or it's not customized to the individual. Right. And I think you can appreciate this as a teacher. You know, there's the language of, oh, I'm an auditory learner and I'm a verbal oral, you know, like all of that. And those are legitimate theories and practices and the way people learn, but it goes beyond that. Learning goes beyond touching something and reading about it and watching and like, it is so much more, and it's not a scary thing. It is not a scary thing.
Well, and the thing, I think there's two interesting things in there. I think one is that one of the things I see with business owners a lot is they're curious about things, but they're afraid to go do that because they don't feel like they should go down that route. And if they follow that route, they'll be off track.
Yeah.
Like off track. Like you can't be like, we physically cannot be off track.
Right.
The only track you got is the track you're on, friends. And like in the following of the curiosity, as long as it's not following curiosity and learning to hide, which I think is a thing. Like we learn like reflexively to be like, I'm going to go take a course now. Right. But as long as it's like, oh, that would be really interesting and fun, then it's like, go find your love, people.
Yeah.
But I think also I taught math for a long time. I still teach college kids math. And the thing I tell them all the time is they'll be like, well, but I'm a visual learner. I don't learn like this. Like, right. And you're going to learn it better if you use it all the ways.
Yeah.
Like you have to push on the one you don't like. You can't just be like, no, I have to see everything on video. Like that's not the point of that. The point is to know what you tend towards and then to do the other things, because that's how you deepen learning. It's not to be like, nope, only videos. Thanks for playing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that's so interesting.
Yeah.
So talk to me about, I mean, we've talked a little bit about this, but talk to me further about like why the curiosity about how people learn specifically. Like where does that come into play for you? And like how, because you went from working with athletes to teaching in that world to a new place where you're working with people on, working with adult learners and making that situation, that experience really effective. And I think there's a lot about curiosity and like how it works for people to learn that's in there. So why?
Well, for me, it was, I am going to share this. I'm going to be vulnerable and say, I was not a great student, right? In elementary school, in high school, and in college as an undergrad, I was average. average. And so for me, school was just a thing I had to do. And when I got my master's in athletic training, again, it's a thing I have to do to have this career. And so as a healthcare provider, I was going through, annually these trainings. And over the years and decades, I was like, this stuff is horrible. Like, I know I need it to maintain my credential. And these people clearly have research expertise in this area, but the way they're presenting it, it is not landing. And then I moved into higher ed, and I looked at, like, as a state employee, it was Title IX training, harassment training. And again, I'm like, this is just bad. It really is bad. And so then I started to become curious. That's when my curiosity from an adult and career perspective really started to flourish, because I'm like, these are things that are required of us as employees, but they're not done well. So how can you expect your employee to be more productive or learn a skill if the training and the learning isn't set up for them to be successful? And that's sort of where it grew. And now that I'm in this space, working with business owners and organizations as a consultant, people are tasked with doing so much. And if you've never taught before, it's very overwhelming. And I'm like, yeah, there is a space for this. There really is a space for how to learn, how to create a learning experience. And my advice to people is, if you relieve yourself of the stress and look at it with a sense of curiosity, like, that's really how you are able to create something that's very meaningful, if you yourself look at it from an eye of curiosity and learning.
Well, and it's like, okay, if the thing I'm fascinated by, I think, especially in this space that you're talking about, is I don't know if the people making the training then sit down at the end and are like, oh, wait, let me take this. Would I learn from this?
Yeah.
Like, can you detach yourself from the backside and be like, all right, if I sit down and I stare at the screen for the next 8 hours, what did I learn? If I look at these 170 slides, what's going to happen?
Right.
Like, I'm going to be bored out of my mind. Or if you try to do it from that perspective, it's like, okay, because I'll see it. I do some talking with clients about course building. That's the nature of teachers. We're like, oh, I'll build the course because course
it's
building
what we do. You're right.
But I'll say, like, okay, so would you learn like this? And they'll go, no. Like, why? Why are we asking it of other people? I mean, I think for me, what's interesting is I was writing notes about this question earlier or Friday, and what I wrote down was that I am just a nosy human. Like, I'm a nosy human, and not like in a creepy way.
Yeah.
But I'm a nosy human, so I am always curious about, like, I think when I was younger, and when I first started teaching, actually, I can remember sitting around professional development things in the math world, and I was not a great math student. Like, I struggled, and that's why I can teach it now, I think. I'm an accidental math teacher for sure. And I tell my college kids, they'll be like, I'm never going to use this. I'm like, I said the same thing. Who sits in this chair now? Never say never, friends.
Right.
But, like, I can remember sitting in trainings and having people go like, oh, well, I think about it like this, and I do this, and I do this. And I'm like, oh, in a million years, it wouldn't have occurred to me to think about it like that. And then it's like, oh, wait, how many ways are there? Like, oh, now we get to play how many ways are there? And but it's the same kind of, like, my husband makes fun of me. We were at dinner last night. We went out without our children. Hello. And, like, I will sit at the table and play in my head, like, how are those three people here together?
Yes.
Right. But it's the same kind of nosy curiosity, and nosy in the best way. It's like, okay, but those three people do not look like they belong together. So, like, what is their relationship? And at the end, I want to go ask them, and that he never is in for support of that. But, like, I think it's really interesting to hear the perspectives, to play that nosiness, and also to like the role of what I found I loved the most over time with people in learning is the role of a good question.
Yes.
Like sometimes that one question
Yes.
opens up the world. And that for me is magic. Like that is the magic of curiosity where it's like, oh, but did you hear this other person did this whole different way? Like, how are your ways the same? And you'll watch people be like, they were not.
Oh, but
maybe they could be. Hold on. Like, in what ways are they the same? And then it's like one good question, like,
yeah,
opens the world. And it's just like that patterning in the world I love.
Yeah. And that's, when I think it may have stemmed from my healthcare training, because the question is always like, well, why, right? Like, why can't they do this? Okay, well, if they can't do that, what's causing that? And, in order to be a more effective educator, I had to keep asking myself as well as the students, why? And then it got to this point where like that was just the thing that I did. People would seek out my counsel on things and I would just I literally would sit and just ask a series of why. And the same holds true now is it's more than the why, but listening to people's reasons for their why, but also to what they're not saying. And that's, as an educator, which I'm sure you can appreciate, when you ask a question and the response is, there's some comment there, but there's a lot of information left out, you're just naturally trained. And for both of us as being curious individuals to say, well, what more are you leaving out? And why can't something exist, or why can't it exist? And so I think there's that, like you're saying, just that level of being nosy and wanting to get to really the root of whatever the case may be is really helpful. It's really helpful. And I was telling someone, Sarah, I'm curious what your thoughts are on this. I was telling someone that there's a distinct difference between being a teacher and a facilitator.
Oh, yes.
Right. And yes, we all need to put on our teacher hat at some point. But for me, particularly working with adults, it's really about facilitation. And a good facilitator is someone who does minimal talking and a lot of asking critical questions.
Well, and I think actually, like in my head, it's funny, I have like a hierarchy of these things. I do. It's like squares or rectangles or parallelograms. It sort of works the same in my head. But it's like this internal Venn diagram. And for me, teacher is the circle in the center.
Yes.
But facilitator eats that, and coach eats that.
Yeah.
Like facilitation is teaching is me telling you, right?
Yep.
And I want, even as someone who teaches college kids, I want to do as little of that as possible, to be quite honest.
I'm with you.
They want me to tell them exactly how it works. Like I had a kid yell at me last semester because I didn't make videos for every single question. And I was like, yeah, that's kind of the point of college right here. Like, I love you, but you have to apply. And that's what this is asking you to do. She's like, but this one is harder. Yep. I mean, but it is that facilitation really matters for adults especially, but for kids too. And I think that so many people like look at teaching as telling instead of as standing elbow to elbow and like walking the path together and going like, well, why did you do this next? And what are your thoughts here? And I think facilitation guides to an endpoint. Like when I used to do PD for teachers, it's like, okay, we are going to get to here. Like we're going to get to this endpoint. That's what we need to learn in this training. And then in coaching, it is that same sort of guiding, but the client gets to pick the endpoint.
Yes.
And I think that's the difference of
Yep.
the hierarchy, right? Like,
Yep.
but I love facilitations, like as a teacher person, way more fun. Like it's just,
I think so.
and
I think so.
better.
And I was telling this person I was talking to about facilitation, I was saying facilitation is harder, in my opinion, because you have to have such a deep understanding of whatever the content is, because you then have to create such a clear, concise, strategic question that will get them on their own to go in multiple ways of thinking. And that is not an easy task at all.
No.
It's not an easy task.
Well, and it's also, I think it's also like a function of flexibility.
Mm-hmm.
I know what I had to find eventually, and what I find even now in coaching is sometimes you ask the question and it's like a great question, it worked really good,
Mm-hmm.
but it wasn't exactly right.
Yeah.
And that's okay. Like
Yeah.
you form another and you don't go like, oh crap, I failed.
Yeah.
The world as I know it ended. It's like, okay, so that didn't, like I have one client who'll be like, it doesn't land like that with that question for me. Let's ask it a different way. It's like she's hilarious. She's always like, this is a great question, but ask it a different way.
Yep.
And it makes it all, we go back and forth. But like it's an interesting, you do have to be really, you have to know what you're talking about. It's a lot more work, but you also have to be confident and comfortable enough in your skin that if it goes left instead of right, that you're not like crying on the floor, like that the world isn't ended, that you can be like, okay, we went left, we meant to go right. Let's think about how we get back to where we actually need to be. Okay, hold on.
Right. But that's, again, that goes back to the being curious, right? Like, why didn't I wanted it to go right, but it went left. But why? Why not? And what is happening to the receiver of the question? Like where is the connection not working? And so in that regard, you truly have to understand who the person is that you're speaking to. And so I just think it's it's an art. It really is an art, and you get better, right? Like we all just evolve as facilitators. But like you, I appreciate wearing the facilitator hat over the teacher hat. I enjoy the teaching piece, but the facilitation, it's just really interesting.
Well, and I think every now and then what you find when you get curious is like you needed to go left before you could go right.
Mm-hmm.
Like there was something you had to like go pick up on that side street that you could not have gone the other way without. And it's like, oh, so how do I next time like make that detour more effectively to be like, oh wait, we need to stop and get milk here before we carry it, right? Because you can't, there are times where you're like, oh, they need this piece they don't have on the way, and I can't just hand it to them because they're going to be like, this is stupid, we don't need milk.
Right.
And that's
what I've found is, if you give it to them, it's just that. It's just a given item or body of knowledge, but yet because they did not have to process it, they really don't know how to use it or even maximize the use of whatever the skill or the knowledge is.
Well, because the things we know best are the things we had to fight for.
Absolutely.
Right. We all can sit down and remember being super frustrated with something and then being like, I got it. We remember those, but the stuff that was handed to us, do you remember any of that?
Right.
You're like, things were those. I don't remember any of those.
Right. And you said something that was really important is frustration. And so that's part of adult learning theory, is that when our learning is the deepest, when there is a deep rooted emotion attached to it. And so like, I mean, you think about
throw things at me.
Yes. You think about anything that evokes strong emotion, you are going to remember those things.
Well, and it's funny, I do I have clients all over the world, and every now, pretty regularly, I'll ask somebody a question and we'll be talking like this, and all of a sudden it's like, They start to move and like pick things, and I know that there's something.
Yep.
No, everything's fine. Like,
Yep.
There's some feeling there. We start to. Those are the things that where you're getting like close to something, and somebody's starting to move. All right, so tell me about how you're using curiosity about learning in particular in the forward direction. Like, how are you using it to inform what you're hoping to achieve, what you're hoping to help other people achieve? Like, how are you leaning? Because we've talked about how we got to it and what it does with us, but like, let's go the other direction.
Yeah. So when I work with clients, I think they're often surprised is that in the first 1 or 2 sessions, I believe there's this expectation that I'm going to give some information like, this is what we're going to do.
I'm going to fix you.
Right. And that's not the case. And so ultimately what I do is I spend the first 1 to 2 sessions asking questions. Well, who are your clients? Who are they as learners? Right. And tell me about your content. Why is it what it is? And for me, it's that sense of being able to identify that person's passion, why they are creating what they're creating, and then asking them things that will help get them a deeper understanding of their clients and their content so that they can build in a more efficient and effective way. Because I think so often, or what I know so often is happening, is that people will have content or knowledge and skills that they want to share, and they just cram it all together and try to serve it up on a silver platter. And unfortunately, that's, in some cases it might work, but it doesn't last. And so I try to be proactive in saying, let's really think about who your clients are. So in order to do that, we have to be curious about their life beyond the avatar and the ideal client narrative, but rather what's happening in their personal lives, what's driving them to learn. And now that we understand that, is our content matching who they are as learners? Because if it's not being supportive, it's going to be hard for them to learn it. But it's so I do those 2 things together before we even start building content, because I again, back to our conversation about being curious, I need to be curious and show that to my clients that you have to do this level of work to be more efficient in your creation, which ultimately will be more effective.
Well, and I think that's all of it, right? Like, that's because I think you're like, what the picture that comes to mind when you talk about taking all the things and cramming it onto plate, it's like going to the buffet and taking a scoop of everything and then taking it back to your seat, like everything, like one of everything.
Yeah.
And then sitting down and being like, I didn't think gravy went on that, but
right.
But then you're like, here, learn. Like,
right.
Like, no, thank you. I might do this in courses more effectively. Like, there's, do you know what I mean? That's not how it works. People's brains don't work like that. And depending on who they are and what they do and why they do it and what the course is supposed to be doing for them, all of that matters. Right.
And so because of that, like, one of the things that I'm finding is in the human resource space, I think that I have so much respect for people in HR because they're doing so many things, and the expectation of them to do all those things incredibly well is anyway. And so what I actually have coming up in early August is a fixed finish, because again, it's sometimes we just need a little small thing, a small question that's targeted. And so what that program does is in 5 hours or 5 days, like, we will go through each of those sections that I take people through actually finish whatever their curriculum and their course is, right? So you don't need a 90, I mean, some people do, but in some cases you only need an hour of really focused questioning and support as the fix to kind of get you going.
Well, and it's the, because if it's that like narrowing instead of cramming.
Right.
And that makes a big difference. It's like, okay, wait, what was your point? Then you don't need all these other things. You don't have to finish them because you only needed 2 of them.
Right. And so that's what I've been doing. Like, I was really curious about about people in the HR space, and so I started asking and having these conversations. And that was the thing that they were telling me, is we have so much on our plate, but we've got these trainings to get done, and only so many hours in the day. And so I've put this program together mainly for them.
Well, and I think the trick to it there is also like the expectation is the training covers.
Yeah.
And how you do that without drowning people in the contents, right? Like that's a tricky thing. Like, I am teaching a summer math course that started last week, and it is the course students at the college I'm at most often fail. It's like a heavy course in 15 weeks, and we're doing it in 6. And they're already like, I'm like, yep, y'all, I got it. Here's how it's laid out. I am being really careful.
Right.
Because I know I already have 2 that were like,
yep.
Bye.
Right. See you next time.
They were like, are you doing this ever in more weeks?
Yeah.
This is
pointless. And that's the thing. It's, sometimes you do need, what I found with my clients is there are cases when we need more time, but then there are other clients that just don't have the time to take.
Yep.
And either way, it's not to say that they both can't create learning experiences that are impactful. It's really the way in which it gets created, the learning experience gets created.
Well, and there's no right way to do that.
Never.
That's the thing. Like, everybody's like, well, it's supposed to. Like,
no,
it's not actually. Because if you walked in, like, I have had the gift of, when I coached teachers, I think over 5 years, if I counted, I was in 100 some classrooms. Like, I've been in a lot of classrooms over the years and worked with hundreds of teachers. And like, I would work with all the 6th grade teachers across the school district, and you'd walk into the same lesson and everyone would do it differently, and their kids would come out with the same endpoint.
Yeah.
Business is the same, right? Like, I have colleagues in the coaching space that do what I do, that talk with people, that work with businesses. You have people in your space that do the same you do, but how they do it is vastly different.
Yeah.
And they still succeed. Like, you've taken a course, you've taken 3 courses on Pinterest, and they all are about Pinterest, and none of them look the same.
Right.
People are like, there's a right way. Like, there's not, friends. There's your way, and that's the right way for you. It's a matter of helping people find it, which is, I think, part of the trick. I think, for me, I was thinking about this looking forward. This is another case where I went like a totally different direction. And I think that for me, like, it becomes about mission. And really, for me, I really believe the most curious people are the teacher people. Like, even if they haven't been in a classroom, it's the people who think that way. That's sort of the teacher mindset to me. They're like, wait, we got to tinker with this so that you can figure out what you need. Like, let me serve you by helping you tinker with this. And like, my goal is to put as many of those people at the head of the table as possible.
Absolutely.
Those people should run the world. Teachers should run, facilitators, let's go run the world. Because can you imagine what the corporate world or even the small business world looks like run by really curious humans?
Yeah.
And my job is to uncomplicate the complicated path to that. Like, that's what I get to do. And so I get to bring my fully curious to make their fully curious go.
Yeah. That's the, as we, I think, sort of wind down, that's one of the things that I find to be very freeing And so I was raised in a household that was very corporate-esque. And, everyone's in the corporate sector. And then to go to college athletics, which is very high stress and regimented, so to speak, when you allow yourself to be curious about anything, the risk is actually very low because no one knows that you're being curious unless you tell them.
Mm-hmm.
And the return on that investment is huge, no matter what you come out with, right? So like I will privately watch how to build a bridge because I'm curious. I'm not going to make money off of that information, but it's a great conversation piece to help me connect with someone else that I may not otherwise.
Well, and I think the interesting, I've been thinking a lot about the trade-offs, right?
Mm-hmm.
The risk you take when you're curious is small.
Yeah.
It's let me see, let me play,
mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
But the risk that you take when you don't do that is huge. And that's the one we forget.
Yes.
Because what you then never know.
You just never know it. Yeah.
Right? Like then it's the risk of, at the start of the year, I was working with a coach and she there was this question she asked us that I was like, uh-oh, bro, this one's going to break my brain. Like I was like, uh-oh. And it was, would you rather risk disappointing other people or yourself?
Mm.
Like, which one are you going to take? And this is the same kind of are you willing to risk being curious?
Mm-hmm.
Or are you willing to risk being not curious?
Yeah.
Because I would rather be the nosy cat on the street and know and see where it takes me.
Yeah.
Than just stay the same.
Yeah.
Or be unhappy.
Right. And just accepting information as it's presented to you.
Mm-hmm. Woo! Carrie Graham. Is there anything else you want to tell the LinkedIn world before we go?
I would say, well, first, Sarah, I just want to say thank you so much for the opportunity to have this particular conversation because it's not something that people often talk about,
Mm-hmm.
Curiosity and learning. And so thank you for that. But I do want to invite all individuals who are creating some type of training or a course for their business, and particularly people in the HR space, to join me in early August. I'm actually going to start posting some stuff this week. Join me in early August. It's a fix to finish program. And then it's 5 hours over the course of 5 days. So 1 hour every day. And I promise you will get everything you need to finish the creation of whatever it is that you need. We've started the third quarter. We're half a year in. Things need to get done. Things have got to get finished.
Well, they do. Yes. There's a couple things I'm like, oh, I need to finish that. I'll see you in August. Thank you for this. It's super fun to talk to you. And I we could do this every week and we would never run out of things to say. It would be perfect. Next year will be Tunnels and Bridges with Carrie and Sarah. But and I would say for me, if you are curious about, if you are someone watching this and you're curious about coaching or learning or growing in that direction, and if you weren't a teacher, it's okay. Everyone's a teacher. I can make a teacher out of anyone. Don't you worry, folks.
Yes.
Come talk. The risk of having the conversation is smaller than the risk of not. In every case, in taking a challenge, in starting a course, in asking about coaching, always, the worst thing you say is no. I haven't died from that yet. Right. I mean, I won't melt. I'm fairly sturdy. I don't melt in the rain. I'm not that sweet. It's all good. Yeah. My life, I will be sad, but I won't be. Mm-hmm. I'll be okay. We'll all be okay. Yeah. And the progress, the trade in progress is worth every minute.
It is.
We will do this again because
absolutely
not to do again.
It totally was. And I think that's the best part about curiosity and learning is it's ever evolving. Your perspectives always change. Life happens, which gives you new opportunities to be curious and to learn. And so, yes, Sarah, I'm in. We will be doing this.
Sweet.
I kind of think podcast, but nevertheless.
No, this is it. Come on, I got one of them. I'm working on moving into guest world right now, actually. Funny you should say that. All right, friends. Thank you all for curiously talking with us today. And we will see you soon. Reach out if you need either one of us. We can't wait to talk to you.
Bye. Absolutely. Bye-bye.